He was being aided by Harry, in a sporadic, haphazard manner, for Harry was also blocking stunning spells and others, nasty and unpleasant, designed to inflict cuts and gashes to limbs and the body which Dumbledore was dealing out to him. Behind them, Ron and Hermione were parrying blows with Lindveldt-Halen. But Cecilia had stopped in her fight for the moment, drawn as she was to her brother-in-law. Sirius looked so vulnerable, so weak, lying there on the cold, flagstone floor. Could she do anything? Should she? She knew that he had been about to hand her son over to Grindelwald. But, he had, in a roundabout sort of way, tried to protect him too, had always protected him. Kneeling by him, Cecilia whispered, "Sirius, what can I do to help?" "Do?" The voice came low, and cracked. But was there all the same, firm, and commanding, even though Sirius Lupin was clearly in pain. "I tested Remus's vampire potion on myself, to ensure its efficacy," the Minister for Magic managed, its tone still managing to chide. "He will live. He will not undergo the change." "I tried to love your brother," Cecilia protested, feeling pent-up emotion, like a dam, behind her throat. "He made it easy at the start, but then... And you forced him to marry ... me." And then there were no more words. She had wanted to say something soothing, something to help a dying man. Clearly, Sirius did not want to hear them. A hollow moan, like a million dying elephants, came from her brother-in-law, but Cecilia's head whipped away. She gripped Grindelwald's wand as the wizard held up a hand, palm facing her. "Avada Kedavra," he began. But, Cecilia was quick enough to hold up Grindelwald's wand, which repelled it immediately, and it traveled towards the veil again. Again, it was extinguished by the artifact's moving fabric. Grindelwald was then engaged with Ron repulsing all spell after spell, his attention taken away from murdering her for a few minutes. And then a voice answered. Cecilia turned around, to see where it was coming from, but couldn't pick it out. It was a slow, lulling sort of voice, like one a mother might use to soothe a child. "Remember, Cecilia, how I first met you?" She nodded, narrowly avoiding a cruciatus curse from Grindelwald, and looked around again. "I saved your life. And, all along, I knew what you wanted. I knew what you desired, deep down. All I wanted to do was to get back to him," sighed Cecilia, her knees gelatinizing as she thought about Remus Lupin, her Remus, the werewolf, back in the old place. "I can take you," the voice continued. "Give up your son. He will thrive." "No!" Cecilia screamed, the beguiling in her mind broken as she exclaimed. "You want me to give him to them?" Listen to your heart, Cecilia Jane Wells, where does your heart truly lie? And then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw Septimus with his 3 friends, comparing what looked like pendants between them, holding them up and looking at them. Grindelwald had noticed them too and was bearing down on the children at speed. "Run, Septimus!" Cecilia shouted, her mind unable to think of a spell with which to use the wizard's wand against him. In fright, the children jumped, but Septimus had in his hand a screw of paper, one which she herself had once given him. He threw the entirety of the pact over themselves as a flash of blue light surrounded them. They glowed as Grindelwald raised his hands towards them, palms facing them, but before he could do anything about them, the boys had gone. "The street, above us. London," Darren declared, when he had finally got some information out of Rufus. All 4 linked hands, as Septimus threw a hail of green powder over them. They vanished. And then, a warm, mocking laughter filled the atrium. Cecilia turned around to see spells and curses ebbing until no wizard was making any attempt at all. Silence filled the atrium, silence save for what sounded like the swishing of material, like the sighing of waves on a lonely beach. Because Lindveldt-Halen was holding in his hand a box. It was black, with a word stenciled on its lid. And it was open. Wood lined its sides, put there, presumably, to add strength to the tin from which it was made. Lindveldt-Halen had the non-wizard flu powder, in one hand and, underneath it, a book in the other. Around the border Cecilia could just about make out a chain of words being repeated one by one, energy like magic. A slow smile crept across Lindveld's face when he opened the box. Taking out a pinch, he scattered the green, glitter-like dust into the air. Cecilia's eyes widened. She remembered it. But from where? Locating the memory in her head was like searching in a box for the thing you put in the once, but isn't there now, and heaven only knows where it really is. Prior incantatem reverso. Using his own non-wizard flu powder, Lindveld had cancelled out Septimus's bright idea and reversed it. All at once, in the archway of the passage, from which the 4 children had left, they appeared, one by one, wobbly at first, like people in a television broadcast from the days when TVs were tuned in with big dials, and you had to get the setting just about right. Septimus Lupin, said Lindveld, simply, when the boys were all standing still before them, announcing him as a compare might between acts on the stage. Gellert Grindelwald, his white spiky hair glowing in the atrium's half-light, turned. A look of triumph passed over his face, and he glanced at his lover, betraying his delight. Septimus Lupin, he echoed, with the laziness of a cat who had its quarry quite literally under its paw, and was taking its time in choosing where it would strike first. You will have to get past us first, shouted Rufus, bravely, stepping in front of his friend, wand raised. Darren joined him, flanking the other side of Septimus. Julian pushed aside Darren. No lack of wand was going to deter protecting his friend, either. Do away with them, Gellert, shouted Dumbledore, impatiently. A quick glance to Hermione and Harry, who were next to him, and he raised his hand. No, shouted Cecilia, running past Snape and Ron, who were training their wands on Grindelwald, and up past him. Her legs were telling her to get to her son as fast as she could, but then her legs stopped working. She was moving backwards, into the arms of her former Durmstrang colleague. Take your prize, Lindveld Halen. Grindelwald snarled, thrusting a locomotor whip burly curse at Cecilia's legs, which caused them to crumple under her, for the good she willed you. And he raised his hand again as Lyd caught her up, crossing his arm in front of her, holding his wand under her chin. No! Shrieked Cecilia, struggling as much as she could in Lyd's grasp. But then, Grindelwald lowered his wand. Septimus was walking out towards him. No! Shrieked Cecilia again, her eyes wild, staring around wildly, to someone, to anyone, who could help her son, who was so willingly going with them. But all of them had tried to raise their wands, to run, to attack, they had been cursed again, and could not move. No, not all. One was not. Snape, who had bent to retrieve his wand from the atrium's floor, had missed the limbind curse, and now had his wand at Cleus's throat. I trusted you. And you forced him to marry her, for what? He demanded. To keep him safe, Severus, replied Cleus, quietly. To protect him. For now. Tabitha raised her head through the floor of the Department of Mysteries. She had done it. The first Mysteria ever to travel to the beyond, harvest memories and return. When she saw Aberforth again, it would be her delight to tell him that he was right. She peered, Kilroy-like, over bottom of the veil, looking around. Exactly where he predicted everything would be, exactly where they should be. And look, Tabitha told herself, looking across to where Lyd was holding Cecilia, there was Aloysius, as he was meant to be, his wand to her throat. We have your memories, Cecilia Jane Wells, every last one of them, proclaimed Gellert, in triumph. Voldemort will make a valuable asset to our alliance. And, together, we will rule 2 worlds. He will never share power, shouted back Cecilia, defiantly. He works with no one. When we offer him a world to rule, he will change his mind. Septimus ran towards his mother, ignoring Grindelwald, ignoring Lindveld. But he did not make it. Instead, he stopped just short of Cecilia, as the very last reprocator addressed him, in the same soft, gentle way in which he had tried to pacify Cecilia. Septimus, you are so like your grandfather, so like my John. He could not do what I am asking you to do. The boy stared at Lindveld, incomprehension in his eyes. And then, from Lindveld's wand, Clouds, like giant tendrils, looped their way through the air, attaching around his waist, pulling him back towards Grindelwald and Dumbledore. "Mum! Mum!" he screamed. Septimus. And then, there was that same thunderous crack which accompanied their original entrance into the atrium occurred again as Albus Dumbledore and Gellert Grindelwald, with their 3 non-transmutable objects, Tom Riddle's bone soaked in Harry Potter's blood, stepped through the veil and beyond. Tabitha pulled herself up out of the hole, the veil's translucent fabric flapping around her. She looked down, as one might look down a well for the bucket. "Is that what you wanted?" demanded Snape, his wand still at Cleus's throat. "To send your nephew to his death?" He wheeled round and turned his wand on Cecilia. "And you, Lindvald Halen?" "Aloysius?" Tabitha, her hand attached to the twine of Togo, which in turn was attached to the memories she had spent some time collecting, smiled widely as she made her way over to Lindvald and Cecilia. "You did marvelously, Tabitha Penright, exceeding all our expectations." Lindvald grinned at her, in delight. How long until this unreality holds? Cecilia watched a woman she had not seen for nearly 3 years stare back towards Herpo's veil. "Until I bring them out," she replied. "Then I still have time," Lindvald breathed, turning to look at Cecilia, releasing her from his arms. "Time for what?" asked Hermione. But Harry had just worked something out and was staring at Lindvald and Tabitha. "My book," he said, holding Mysterious Mythology out towards Cecilia, his eyes looking, if not sorrowful, then regretful. "I remember when it was made. Raymond had just finished some work with de Broglie, and came out of the lab and handed it to me." Cecilia stared. It was the book, she knew it. Not just a copy of a children's book containing secrets. This was the real deal, the one Remus Lupin had given to her for her research all those years, and 1 dimension ago. Here, she remembered, she had left it behind in her room. Had he left Hedgewards to get it? And then there's these. Refined. Perfect. She looked at his hands again. A scroll of parchment lay within them and, curled up in the paper, 2 vials, Harry Potter's match and base. Cecilia looked back at Lindvald, and it occurred to her that he looked even younger than when she had seen him last, when he had taken her to the Durmstrang dance, when she had been given this dress by Ragnhild. Ragnhild. Cecilia looked across to the place where she had breathed her last. "We will meet again, Cecilia," she had told her, "but under terrible circumstances." "You are not Lindvald Halen, are you?" asked Cecilia, slowly. "No, he's not," declared both Harry and Tabitha together. They looked at one another, but Harry got the first and continued, "The Time Turner. The missing one." "Yes, Harry Potter," said Lindvald Halen, putting his hand to his throat. He extracted a gold chain, which glittered in the atrium's half-light. In the center of its pendant was a disc, attached at 4 points to an outer ring. Another ring sat around the disc, which made it so the Time Turner could move up and down, backwards and forwards, left or right, and in the middle was an hourglass. Or rather, a century glass. "You are quite right," nodded Lindvald. "There was one missing. But it went missing a long time ago, 1927, if you must know." And then suddenly, Aloysius Lupin reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, multicolored brooch. Cecilia felt her mouth open in amazed fascination. She recognized it, even though it was nearly 13 years since Remus Lupin had given it to her. "There," he said, nodding as he pinned it to the strap of her evening dress. "Bessie would want you to have it, I am sure." And then the net tightened. At the same time as Tabitha began to pull in the twine to remove the memories from beyond, Aloysius Lupin grabbed the waist of his granddaughter-in-law and stepped through the veil, light as bright as burning magnesium filling its chamber. Tabitha released the rope onto which the memories were tethered and followed them back through it. The memories skipped and moved obeying Brownian motion, until they were occupying the whole of the veil's chamber, orthoed memories, unbounded in time and space, leaking out in Department of Mysteries, like radiation FRPM a damaged nuclear reactor. And in another place, at another time, where a boy fights for his life against the most evil wizard persisting in his time, a veil ripples with life. 88,888,888. Beyond the veil, and in the souls, Cecilia felt her mind filling with thoughts and memories, random and disordered, ones of a childhood dinner with her family abutting teaching mole studies to Harry's class abutting a time in Dalton Drive waiting for Blue Peter to come onto her family's old-fashioned black and white television set. Her memories were being returned to them, as they surfed the backdraft of those taken by Albus Dumbledore. If she were in any position to rationalize what she was experiencing, Cecilia may well have aligned the experience to that felt by a dog with his head out of the window on fast car journey. She tried to say something, but Aloysius put his fingers gently to her mouth. No need to say anything. Watch. Another place, another time. A wizard, pacing in his office, before stopping abruptly. Severus Snape folded his arms, the dark mark on his forearm clear to see. He was not the Severus Snape Cecilia had known for 12 years, untainted by guilt and bitterness, alive to possibility and greatness, but the one who had been there for her, at Christmas, who she had kept alive, who had scurried her from Remus's cottage while she attempted to solve the mystery of Harry's potion to overcome Voldemort, who had clumsily revealed his feelings for her, projected feelings of his love, ever-enduring, for Lily Potter. The Severus Snape twisted through with sorrow and regret. What does she need, Severus? What will ensure she develops Harry's potion? Time, said Snape, simply, eyeing Dumbledore's desk. Years a dozen, maybe? But we haven't got years. There may be a way. There was a way, Lindveld whispered in Cecilia's ear. There is a way, Dumbledore echoed. Aloysius Lupin can provide what we need. If only she can find him.